what we're doing is unlocking value in projects and communicating that value. We see a little bit of a gap in the market of how architects could do that.
Hello and welcome to the Business of Architecture UK. I am your host, Ryan Willard, and today I had the great pleasure of visiting again White Red Architects, this time in their new studio, or not so new studios, down in Clerkenwell. You may remember back in 2018, Dicky Lewis and Joe Haire were one of the first ever guests that we actually had here on Business of Architecture UK. So it was brilliant to be visiting them again 4 or 5 years later and to see what they have created, because it's really quite exciting and extraordinary. So Dicky co-founded White Red Architects in 2014, unifying the large-scale project experience of his fellow directors into an energetic practice in exciting projects in the UK and internationally. Joe is responsible for fostering the studio's design culture. And prior to co-founding White Red Architects, Joe worked at Hawkins and AHMM, where he completed the AELP Fitness Centre, worked with Google on their offices in King's Cross, and delivered 20 Farringdon Road for Derwent London. Dicky himself was previously at Foster and Partners, where he worked on a variety of projects from concept designs, such as the competition win of 425 Park Avenue office tower in New York, which I actually remember when RSHP went up for that, and there was a lot of competition between the two offices. Very good project. He worked on the competition wins of McLaren Production Centre right through to the delivery of the technical design stage for Tocumen Airport in Panama. So this was an absolute pleasure to be sitting down with Dicky and Joe. Both of them are really switched on. Jesus, who is the third partner, he wasn't interviewed this time, but was there in the background, and his influence as well in the business can't be understated. But to sit down with Dicky and Joe, so inspiring. We talk a lot about their tremendous success since the last interview, how they've approached winning work and pipeline building, what sorts of activities had they been doing. It's really good to see how they've just really focused on the business aspects of their organization, and to grow from when I interviewed them, there were 3 people, maybe with a few contractors, to now the team of 20 or so that they have in their office. We spoke a little bit about how they've utilized mentors and advisors and consultants and experts to support their growth. And we look at how they have kind of taken a financial lens and made sure that they are monitoring those important numbers all the time in their business. So loads and loads of really great, informative stuff here. Sit back, relax, and enjoy White Red Architects. This episode is sponsored by Smart Practice, Business of Architecture's flagship program to help you structure your firm for freedom, fulfillment, and financial profit. If you want access for our free training on how to do this, please visit smartpracticemethod.com. Or if you want to speak directly to one of our advisors about how we might be able to help you, please follow the link in the information. Joe, Dicky, welcome back to the Business of Architecture. How are you both?
Great, it's great to be here. 5 years.
I know, amazing.
It's mad.
Yeah. I cannot believe it. And it wasn't that long ago when Joe and I were sitting in the Hoxton, and Joe was about to leave AHMM.
I was 12 at the time. Yes, that was a very different time. Yeah.
So it's really incredible what you guys have accomplished in the last 5 years, since 2018. You're one of our early podcasts, and we're sitting here in your beautiful studio, stylish studio with a team of 20 strong here in the centre of Shoreditch. And when we first spoke, I think it was just you two and Jesus, and
it was just the three of us.
It was just the three of you. It's been what a journey. I mean, this is a difficult thing to do for a practice, to kind of go from the startup position and just move out of that kind of 3-person micro practice type of thing. That could be a 20-year process. So I guess the first question is, how did you do it? Or what have been some of the real key strategic moves or keys to success or opportunities, strokes of luck, flukes?
I think, I mean, at that time, particularly when we recorded the podcast with you, we were prioritizing business development and how we could attract clients. It was almost our first problem. And that was the beginning of our journey, really, of really taking that business development side of things really seriously and trying to strategize it. So we'd probably say that's our key that helped us to sustain a level of growth, combined with obviously other things, but that's the fundamental.
We were talking about pipelines, I think. Well, I was watching that video back, and that was like a totally novel concept. Certainly for me, we were just getting our head around what does this even mean. And I mean, essentially, we were trying to systemize it so we could focus on what we wanted to do, which was design buildings. But we realized how little we knew about running a business and how much we had to learn.
What were some of the key things that, or the key challenges that you've overcome, or things that you had to learn and get a grasp on pretty quick?
Meeting people is probably a massive one. I mean, your network is obviously so important, and you don't realize how little your network is when you're working on big jobs for another practice. You don't know. I mean, there's great people probably that you know, but you don't realize the value or the potential or how you actually need that if you're building a business. So just getting to meet people was probably the biggest thing, and
the right people as well. I mean, we kind of ran around a bit and tested the waters by reading about business development, reading about prospecting and putting it into action, but a bit of a slapdash way. So that does come back to bite you because it doesn't align with your goals. And you learn quite quickly that potentially you're being pulled in a direction by your clients that you're ringing.
Well, this is what often happens: is that you'll win a few projects, or most practices start up. You're forced to do a bit of business development because you're frightened about not making the mortgage payment and kids and all that kind of stuff. And there's a bit of activity where you go outside of your comfort zone, win a few projects, breather, and then just live off kind of referrals, but then be in a perpetual state of frustration because it's exactly that. It's just the same stuff that's coming back. So,
and it's unpredictable.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't depend on it. I think that's the other thing, that anxiety or that fear or that constant discomfort of not having a predictable pipeline means you can't focus on making what you do better. You can't make a business that does good output, which is the architecture we're doing. So I have to make this more predictable. We have to make this better quality as well, better quality opportunities. So we had to sort of focus on shoring up that part of the business first.
And strategizing, we took time just to say, let's just pause a little bit here and let's sit down together and do some homework of who is it that we want to work with and who do we want to start speaking to, where do they network, where do they speak to, who are the other consultants that work with them. Let's speak to them and learn more about indirectly. And it was a really interesting process because quite quickly you start hearing the same names again, and you can't believe that you didn't know who they were only a few months ago, but now you're kind of on the top of your list and maybe you're even speaking to them. So it was that strategy moment that was really useful for us in the more recent.
What was the process like then of actually kind of understanding the landscape that you wanted to operate in? What did it actually look like? Were you guys sitting down at a desk?
We did a lot of cold calling,
right,
which was very uncomfortable. We went to a lot of events. We went to a lot of events that we realized were probably a waste of time. We went to a lot of events that we realized, gosh, we should have found this earlier. And we realized regularity at these were really important. You slowly built familiarity, and you would meet people and take a chance, certainly when you didn't really understand what their role was in the process, take a chance and get to know how they worked within the industry and also how they saw what we did. That was a really important part of it, because actually the mirror back to us totally flipped our perspective on what we thought architecture was within the whole process of getting buildings built.
And then internally researching. So we had a system we set up on an app where we started collating the data. We started looking to the projects we liked and then who was working on those, who is the client, who's the M&E engineer, who's the PM.
Mapping
out those consultants.
Just the sort of reverse engineering.
Exactly.
Kind of, this is the sort of project we want to have. Who are the team players?
Yeah, and the reverse engineer is the exact word for it, because it almost felt like this is a bit pointless because the ship has sailed a bit on these. So why would you do that? But more often than not, these are the types of clients that have a repeat pipeline.
Studying how that game essentially unfolded.
Were there certain sectors that you put more emphasis on, or were you kind of like, we definitely want to begin with? Well, you don't want to do resi or...
No, a scattergun to begin with.
Yeah,
to be honest,
okay.
It was totally scattergun. But what's been interesting is we always had a lot of commercial experience based on our previous experience. You certainly started doing quite a bit of hospitality.
Yeah, hotels and hospitality was an avenue we've started down, and Joe obviously lots of commercial experience, but we were also picking up a lot of residential restaurants and
restaurants,
all sorts.
little restaurants, all sorts of stuff.
Whereas that then led us to say, okay, let's start working out what our sector is, and we realised that our strength was in the commercial field with the element of hospitality, and they really work well together. So it really helps us to focus that research and that.
When you're approaching some of these clients, perhaps who have kind of been working with other architects and who are kind of well established in themselves, and you are like the young guns, how do you negotiate a place at the table, and particularly if they've already got strong relationships with other practices?
Yeah.
How do you kind of move your way up the list of people that they should be speaking with?
I think you're building as many positive touch points with those people as possible, and it takes time. And you might get introduced and do a bit of free work to unlock feasibility. You might just give a different opinion. You might meet over 6 or 7 times. I remember reading that in a book recently about the 7 touch points, and someone needs to spend 7 hours with you before they really kind of commit to spending what obviously fees of architecture need to be. You're building up time with those people, and as a result, you're building up trust, and they're getting to know you, and they're getting positive reinforcement from other people around, which is why it was so important studying those, I'm just calling them games, but studying that jobs happened, they work with these people. But we're starting to establish ourselves with those consultants as well, and then therefore the end client, who's I suppose the target, is getting positive reinforcement. And so as a result, every day, it's more likely that you would be a viable option for them.
So it's one thing to kind of reach out to a new target client and say, hi, we're down the road, or we're White Red Architects.
Yeah.
How do you, what's the nature of the communication that you use to follow up and not be, you're not being annoying. Yeah, exactly. You're treading the line of being a pest to being someone who's giving value.
About being a pest, no. It's a good question. Well, I don't know.
Well, I'm sure there is an element of
absolutely. And we're very
self-conscious.
We're very self-conscious, but we also realise that you've got to be persistent to an extent. And you've got to think you've got some value to give, and we're more confident in our product and what we do every day. Dicky mentioned that mix between workspace and hospitality. I actually think we're quite uniquely placed to be delivered, because we also do occupier, a lot of occupier work with Virgin and with Google. So you're getting a really nice mix of voices that are all having a really positive effect on what office can be. That's got that hospitality, that's got that sort of forward-thinking staff retention, staff attracting. We've got all of those ideas coming together, and we've got something of value to offer, and we should get that message out there. So it doesn't feel like you're bothering them because you've got something to give.
Yeah, it's also less about us against them and just clients solely, and more about the actual project team, the wider project team, and project managers, quantity surveyors, all of the different fields come together, and you realise the project is a team game, and that, for example, a project manager needs a good architect to be by their side as much as the client does. So it's less about the direct route of straight to the client, bothering the client, to be honest. And it's more about the community of the consultancies.
Right, okay.
Which really helps us to chill out a bit with having to try and just to feel like
it's not just
our client.
Yes, it's not like you're ringing the same client up every single couple of weeks and saying, got any work?
No, exactly.
Yeah, and eventually, if you have a project manager and a quantity surveyor both singing praises of an architect, eventually that client might also say, okay, let's also speak to them, and that's the preferable route, which really helped us. And also helps us keep learning about who to work with, because that was the longest time, as much as internal research we did. As soon as you go outside and start speaking to the people that have got the boots on the ground and are working with the clients, then it's a different story sometimes.
But how did you learn to qualify who was going to be a right kind of fit for you versus not? And was that more, there was a lot of trial and error involved.
A lot of trial and error.
We still are.
We're still trial and error.
Yeah.
Well, you spend time with people, and you also, because you're talking about things that matter to you and your experience and what you're trying to do, you're talking to people that you can see are more or less aligned. The more time you spend, the more you know, and you do projects together and you push those ideas forward. Where, it's instinctively you find people that are kind of aligned with what we're trying to do as a team.
Yeah. What about in terms of your own personal leadership? So going from working just the three of you now to building up a team and now there's mouths to feed now and there's other people's mortgages to take care of and there's benefits and stuff. That comes with a whole load of its own challenges, and what worked whilst you were three people, it might have worked whilst you were 3, 4, 5, and then all of a sudden there's this breakdown of processes and systems that were effective, and now you've got a team of 20. Yeah. What's that process been like?
Well, it's why, this concept of the business is so important, and why building the business responsibly is a really key part to producing creative work. And that's something that we have always been focused on, is that entrepreneurial mindset of actually also combining that with being an architect. So important. So a lot of it for us has been leaning on mentors and people that have done it before. There's a lot of wealth of knowledge out there, and it's about learning as quickly as we can. And also with our team being quite open and honest that we are also still learning, and White Red is something that's in progress. It's a really exciting thing to be part of. It's not the complete package yet, but that's almost a really exciting attribute to it. So there's been an element of that during our growth, and we think that's what makes it exciting, but obviously it's all learning constantly as well. So
I think that's sharing, and particularly more recently, sharing that responsibility a bit more within the team of, we're building something and it isn't perfect. And no practice is ever, no business is perfect, but it's changing and it's in flux, and it's for the three of us to input on, but it's for us all to input on and make it work. And getting clear on what the key core goals are obviously really important, but then saying, how do we make that work as a team? So getting the right support in, managing the studio, getting the right support in, managing the projects, managing the materials, managing the way that we talk to clients, all of that stuff we're working together on, which is nice, and it's shared.
One of the things that lots of architecture practices struggle with, and probably the biggest inhibitor to growth, is never really relinquishing the cap of the architect and wearing the hat of the business owner. And the way that often manifests itself is, architects don't do marketing and prospecting. I mean, even the fact that you use the word prospecting is puts you aside from 90% of most architecture practices. And I hate to say that, but it's, and I was saying to you earlier, sometimes if I'm advising on marketing for architects to how to differentiate yourself, and one of the actual easiest things is just do some marketing, do some prospecting, because most of your contemporaries aren't. But there's a reason for that. There's kind of cultural reasons and business aversion, and there's also most architecture firms and practice owners get really deeply embedded into project work and delivery that they can never pull themselves out of that in order to be able to go and do the high value work of marketing and sales. How have you been able to, ride that tension? How does it work? How do you...
Well, we still have, we have that. We're all guilty of getting too swallowed by projects. But I would say we've got, architecture is a fantastic thing. You touch so many people. The process is incredibly complicated, but you can do real good with it. And when you focus all of that energy on one project, you can have a great project. But if you could focus that energy on apply the same processes to a business, it's the same working pieces, but it can have a far bigger impact. And if you feel like you've got good to give, then try and focus on a bigger picture. And that's where I think we've probably said that the business is our most important creative project.
And I think there's an element within architecture that traditional way of an architect completing a project and clients come running because it's so beautiful, it's not relevant in today's industry. And the way we approach marketing is not in the traditional architecture sense where you wait to finish your project, take great photos of it, and just post about yourself. And we think that within the team framework of collaborators, of project managers and the rest of the team, we add value in our way. And marketing is about how we communicate that and communicating that value along the way, shining the spotlight not just on ourselves, on the project or on the problem. And so that's where it's a really interesting outlook to use marketing, which is, a dirty word in architecture, but all it is really communicating how we can add value genuinely. And that's really exciting. And then if you can get in that mindset, it's really, really interesting to build on.
Do you work with outside consultants, like marketing consultants and PR consultants, to kind of help? Or
we have done.
We did, yeah. We and we were probably not briefing them right, and it took us to do probably about a year and a half's worth of researching. Which is, there's plenty of material out there in other industries of marketing and what other industries do. And we learn a lot about how we can incorporate that within architecture, and there's not many practices doing it. And so we're really excited, and it's also just the beginning where we're at the moment. We still are in the kind of traditional business development prospecting mode, and we're trying to overlay that with also communicating what this great studio is, the great people within it, and the value that we add to our projects. And that is the marketing that we're trying to get going on now.
Do you find yourselves being, this is what you're describing as a very kind of proactive approach to client acquisition. And we hear so many issues in practice about clients will often develop a brief and have an idea of what they want the architect to fit into in terms of budget and what the role is. And then they kind of go public of like, now we need an architect.
Yeah.
And then you've got this problem of, well, now you're bidding against a whole load of people and you've got to squeeze yourself into whatever the ill-defined hole is that they've created, usually with the help of a lawyer and some finance guy who are probably not the best people to be, strategizing all the time around this kind of things. Have you found then that you're getting involved in these higher level strategic conversations with clients that then needs to work and you can bypass some of the competition routes? Or is it you still take the traditional route of applying for?
Well, I think it's both. We are, because you by all of that prospecting and talking to people and getting to know each other, they've got an idea of who we are. In a way, that's the direct marketing that we want to replace with the material and the content that we're producing.
Yeah.
But even when that lawyer-inspired pitch comes through the door, because of the way we're approaching marketing and what we do, we're thinking about that differently, and we actually present something back that might be slightly different because you're trying to analyze it from their perspective. What are we trying to do together as a team? What does this building really want to be? You've said this, but actually, and we can give you this, but actually, wouldn't it be a really nice opportunity to do this? There's huge value here, or this building can do this for you. And then you're not critiquing the brief. You're trying to stand with them in the position when they wrote it. And then I think that sort of sets out the project really nicely, because the pitch actually then changes from being a competition to a moment when we, all of us as a team, get excited about an idea that we all have co-authored. And then it can change over time, but we all start in the same point. And then use marketing throughout that to also challenge and capture it.
Yeah.
We've also had a couple of recent opportunities where we didn't win the overall pitch, but that particular client said, you know what, you are actually perfect for this project and this opportunity. So it was quite useful for us to present ourselves genuinely and what our ethos is, and allow the rest of the team to try and help locate us on where we suit best. And that becomes a more successful relationship, that there are a lot of different varieties of different projects that we fit in better. So it's almost better that we didn't win the pitch we won before, because that potentially wouldn't have been as good a coexistence. Yeah. So we've had two recent examples of that, where it's been really beneficial to everybody. And it's been quite exciting, really, to be more aligned with the client, and for them to have that perspective on us has been an interesting outlet which we didn't foresee.
And they're coming with energy then to the studio, going, well, we can apply what you were talking about on that project to this. And then they're coming into the studio and they're seeing things that we were talking about in the pitch. And they're like, that's exactly why we're here. And we've obviously, by focusing on this marketing, we're saying more about ourselves more authentically. And I think it's got more of a payoff than we thought it probably would as a result. There's all of these things that are happening as a result. We started with one place, which is we need to improve our message, we need to try and attract more work, but actually it's massively improving our day-to-day communication. You've got more conviction in what you are saying because you've been rehearsing it. You understand the value.
Have you found that now you're kind of getting to a kind of size in practice where you're rubbing shoulders with other kind of much more well-established practices who've been in the game for like 15, 20 years? How does that relationship work with other practices? Is it one of collaboration or competition or learning from each other?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually an interesting question because it's something that we value a lot and reach out to a lot of other practices. And we've got a really great selection of mentors that whether or not they like it or not, we've forced them to be our mentors. I was thinking about the other day.
I'm coming over for coffee.
Yeah. I was thinking
of that guy.
It's like microdosing mentorship. Like sneakily getting coffees in and then not realizing they're actually becoming a mentor. But we've actually got some really great examples of directors of larger practices that we look up to and admire, and we've just spent the ear of and come away from it with a ton of value. And what's amazing is that most of the time, actually all the time, people really like helping people, especially architects. We actually all do like helping each other, and we should do. And you look at some of the AJ comments and you wouldn't think that, or the dizzying comments, but actually the keyboard warriors aren't the ones that are actually out and happy to meet you for coffee. The ones that are the ones that understand relationships. It was actually, I was on a panel in Dubai with David Adjaye, and I got introduced as like the cool kid of upcoming architecture, and David Adjaye was like, looked at me like, who is this? And we had a really great discussion. And at the end, he said, "Oh, let's grab a coffee back in London." And it took a little while to set up, but I was really,
not bothering. Didn't send many.
It's a rough
I remember all the voicemails.
And you follow on Instagram as well.
The crying on the phone, But we had such a great chat at his office, and I was so surprised about how great he was at thinking about his business. And it really inspired, when I came back, it inspired us. Listen, even David Adjaye is thinking like this, and sometimes you just assume things and it's not quite right.
Yeah.
And, Joe's former boss, Simon Alford from AHMM, has been great with us.
Yeah.
And, since Joe handed his notice in, has been more than willing to have chats, in-depth conversations about finances.
Yeah,
amazing.
All of those things which every time we get graced with 15, 20 minutes with him, it empowers us and inspires us.
You also think you're going to impress him with he's like, he's just, you've seen it all before. But he always said actually that whole point of if you want to do good architecture, you've got to be in business. So it's fundamental. You've got to focus on that.
How do you conceptualize of your business then? What are the major parts of it that you look at, or departments, or?
We've got three.
We've got three.
Yeah, so I mean, we've actually, talking about external consultants, we've been working with Business Coach.
Right.
So it's the three directors to help us understand ourselves, which has been really, really great, because inevitably you're three different people, and that's a good thing. And you need to harness that and embrace it. And then also you're, in theory, in charge of leading forward the rest of the team, and which is full of multiple different personalities and experiences. So it's been, that process for us has been about a 9-month process of firstly us assessing ourselves, and then working with the team for us as a collective to understand where we want to go. And so that's been transformational for us to understand it, and we've drilled down 3 core elements which we're focusing on, which is our values, which is itself, the operational side,
right,
and then the brand. So they cross over together.
So much.
Values can't happen without brand, and brand can't happen without values, and operation is obviously
tied to it.
So clearly.
So the operations is the kind of in the business delivering the work,
the administration of it,
and
making sure things
systems
happen
around it. Okay,
yeah,
so
but also the
HR,
process of
finance.
producing the architecture as well, of making sure that stuff happens.
Right, so your kind of workflows. and
Yeah.
things.
But even socializing, what do we do? When do we do it? What's the summer party going to look like? All those things are important to everybody and all of us. And that's really amazing that it all sits under one umbrella. But that is so aligned to the values.
Yeah.
And then the brand it's really a horrible word in a way. I really resent using that, but it is the energy that people come in here and they get, and you can't quite put your finger on what it is, but it's the combination of values.
It's like a kind of emotional response that people have when they think
it's a smell. But
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's it's
the incense.
well, that's what we've got.
The lingering aroma.
Yeah, we're a perfume company as
Yes,
well.
we're diversifying. That's the key idea with business. But,
Love it.
but I was going to say that at the end of that, and they all three make each other work. But what's really interesting about the branding and the marketing now going forward is what Dicky said about all of the diverse voices and how that could be very complicated, or it could be an enormous advantage, which it is. It's an enormous advantage. Is really celebrated and brought to life with marketing, because you get people talking, you get people sharing their view on things. You realize just how differently different people can view the same thing. But then you're tying that in sort of a direction. All of this is part of that value. It's the values that we have. It's powerful, isn't it? Yeah.
So with the operations then, and the thing that probably most architects struggle with the most is, keeping projects profitable.
Yeah.
And that's, we're dealing with complexity. You're dealing with other consultants who perhaps don't have the same level of integrity that you might do.
Too close to
There's decisions, indecisive clients. And then a client suddenly changes what the brief is, and you've got enormous amount of scope creep. And if you're not tracking your time, then this is where architecture becomes a very complicated business to be operating. Is just the kind of management of profit. And I mean, I would probably assert that most architects don't even think about profit as a margin, or it's not. How do you guys? What's the kind of culture that you've established in the office, and
it's been
what's the growth around that been?
It's been probably a 1.5 year long journey,
right,
from that realization that if we don't harness this, we're almost creating a bigger flywheel each year of a problem of catching up on resourcing and not containing the fact that we're a business and we have to be profitable. And so it's been a long journey of bringing in external consultants, having internal help to switch softwares to enable the team to track time properly and to really ask the questions of what is the profitability for our projects and what happens if we fall below that. Then all those things, it's in progress, but it's on top of our agenda. Really.
It's a huge. I think we thought it'd be simpler than it was. It isn't, because of all of the stakeholders, all of the things that can happen on a project. We've invested in some proper software to actually track that. But again, running that software is one thing, to invest in it and get set up, which is a big undertaking.
Then you get the disciplines and
then the discipline of actually using it
and
properly, so you can rely on that information. And what are you measuring?
Yeah.
How can you make decisions? And how can you make decisions and changes after you've had a meeting? The infrastructure is enormous. We're setting it up, but we're also sort of developing our gut to work with that as well. But we're getting closer, and we are far more clear now, and we do have much more accountability.
Mm-hmm. Well, the important thing is it's highly up on our agenda, and that's, as with running the business, you can't do everything and you're running around like crazy, but we've got to almost give ourselves that we're on it, and we're trying, whereas we weren't before probably, and it's really exciting now to actually approach profitability as a target.
How do you go about ensuring that you're getting the right fees in projects? It's kind of related to profitability, and when you're looking at projects, and do you have a good grasp of what other people are charging in their fees, some of your competitors?
Yeah, I mean, every so often you get glimpses of your competitors' fees, and I think what does link in with profitability, and it almost feeds itself, is what is our resource cost as a practice, our overheads and all of those costs that it costs the business, plus the team's time. So that really is helpful. You can go out of confidence back to a fee proposal, and if you lose it because you're too expensive, that you
would have lost money if you took it on that.
That's it.
And you just think you can't buy work, and And it's also back to the marketing, which is the internal value of, well, if they're not valued, then it's fine. You know, there's someone else who are out there that might be able to do it cheaper, and they may be a better fit for that client.
Yeah.
That's it, exactly, yeah.
In terms of building out a team, what were some of the first team members that were essential for you to bring on, and how is that maturing?
Oh well,
It's a good question, actually. Yeah,
we were doing everything obviously to begin with, and so we needed support drawing. We needed support. You know, we're planning applications and producing views, and so we had a technician and part twos joining, and we were the project architects, and we were taking those projects and doing all of that, managing all of the communication, presentations, leading the process of producing the technical information, and then going on site, and then slowly architects have joined, and then more recently we've had hired far more senior people join. So it's been a process of slowly building out the team from, I suppose, the direct implementation up to the management.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing that we'll often see with practices, kind of again another pitfall, is particularly as a small practice, it makes, on the surface of it, it makes sense to hire young and inexperienced. And then that comes with its own problems of now you've spent 2 years mentoring somebody and now they leave just as they're getting really competent at what it was that they're doing, because now some other practice has poached them. And then you start again, and then it's this continual, and it's very difficult to make, money out of when you're training people to get up to scratch. How did you...
It was actually Simon Alford was the one that said to us, you guys are in the phase now where you have to deliver. Your reputation is your most important asset.
Right.
And if you don't deliver, and if you drop the ball, it will get around quicker than you know it. And, it's almost nowhere to go. So it was a really, really great piece of advice for us, because it is tempting to try and just be like, well, maybe we just wing it and get it through. It's the classic architect all-nighters syndrome where you're like, just wash it out.
Throw energy.
Yeah. And it's worked for us, historically at university sometimes, but at the end of the day, the tutors always find out later at the end. And it's the same for us as the practice. We're now getting to the stage where we're working on larger projects, and as you start entering into the stage 4 tender periods, it then goes on to site where all the problems start, coming out of the woodwork. Yeah. So that was a big investment for us, realizing that actually we needed the seniority and the experience within the team for ourselves as well. We were started as young directors, so relatively our experience in practice wasn't as established as a lot of other architects out there. So we needed that support and experience as well.
That takes a lot, actually, of kind of like getting your own ego out of the way to hire more, hire senior people. And it's like, as well, it's a serious investment when you're looking.
It is. It is good. It's a good thing to invest in. Clears your vision. I was going to say also, you mentioned about training people up and they leave, or we kind of, I suppose, also realize that is a massive risk doing that, and you should be. It's better for everybody if you invest in our way of doing things, and also defining roles really clearly, so that there's clarity. As a bit more of a system, people understand where they are within it, and that's something we're working quite actively on at the moment, which I think, sort of safeguards against that, and means you're also going to have a more, better quality.
Have you guys experimented with different service typologies in terms of non-traditional architectural services, or moving into your own developments, or is anything is like this on the table?
I mean, the traditional role of an architect has changed, and I think a lot of architects are trying to fight against that. And almost just hark back to an era where architecture was well regarded and architects were very well paid and they led projects. And actually, we are really comfortable with the fact that we're one part of a team here, and the client is a big part of that and should get a lot of the glory too. It isn't all the architects anymore. But there's also those elements of talking about marketing that we're excited about, the fact that potentially what we're doing is unlocking value in projects and communicating that value. We see a little bit of a gap in the market of how architects could do that. So we're looking into different services, but it's the very, very beginning stages of it. And it's actually a really exciting way of looking at architecture, seeing it as a variety of streams of adding value with design and creativity. If you look at it as that blankly, there's multiple streams than just the way that traditional architecture used to be.
And you mentioned it, a lot of architects go towards development and starting to do their own development. I think I would say that those aren't particularly compatible often. If you think about, we're desperately trying to unlock a design, it's that value, it's communicating that value. It feels like a far more comfortable adjacency is to say, well, that branding of that building or the way that is presented, or what's the value here from the market perspective in terms of what the design should be. Focusing on that side.
Well, this is interesting. The architect developer model quickly becomes,
the developer model.
Well, exactly. And then you're going to be because you're going to be in competition now with the developers, and they're not going to want to give you the architectural work.
No.
So you're going to have to make a choice at some point to go down either route. And so sustaining the architectural, like a more traditional architectural service, becomes interesting. Like you're saying, if you're being aware of how to either repackage or be innovative with the sorts of services that you're doing, moving into the kind of world of experience and branding.
Yeah,
exactly.
And it's almost pushing the boundaries a little bit more from the way that we look at it is that architects are brilliant problem solvers, and we can apply creative solutions to solving problems. And if you look at a project timeline and what's involved with it, is usually something that needs to be solved, and an architect can help that by producing drawings and creating designs. But it doesn't stop there. It can also move onwards to then how does that approach the market? How does that attract, for an office, for example, specific tenants? Yeah. And then what happens when a tenant then moves onwards? Is there a place for us to also be involved further along that?
More of a partnership.
How fluent are you, would you say, in your clients' business cases and business agendas? Is that something that's you've kind of spent a bit of time on?
Yeah, depending on which client, but often vary because you're trying to work out what to do with the building, and they'll talk about how they're approaching it, and they'll talk about the viability of different models, and obviously architecture is a massive part of that, and you're often part of that conversation. It depends. It depends on different clients.
It's a real tightrope because you don't want to be on one end the classic diva that has to insist on everything going their way, but you need an element of that because that's also the creativity.
That's what they're paying for.
But then on the other end, if you do too much down the commercial route, then you're losing that divaness that is required to kind of think differently and make the project move on.
I think it's very interesting. We were talking earlier about the kind of differentiator for an architecture practice in the marketing, and just by doing marketing is like number one. That differentiates you. Yeah. But also, I found people who, when they work with consultants or you've got a real interest in the business and designing the business, then that's automatically a great tool to be talking to another business owner who most of your clients.
It's certainly easier for you to understand because of the way you've had to approach your business.
Yeah, exactly. And you've started to think about your own problems, and now you can start to translate some of that understanding into the design service, and it makes you as a much more richer, trusted advisor.
Yeah. And that pain points of budgets and overruns, you get it.
Yeah,
it's not just an annoyance.
Absolutely,
it's ruining your brick choice.
So you guys, you've been diversifying in terms of typologies and sectors that you're working in, and you've also been working internationally. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because again, this is no easy thing to be engaging with in terms of a whole host of complications.
Definitely, I think it was something that I was previously at Foster and Partners, and I was always working on international projects. So it was something that I assumed everyone did.
Let's work in India.
Exactly. And so we started White Red with some opportunities in Mumbai, in India, and we wanted to embrace them. So we built a team that helped us to deliver projects over there. And tried to build up more of a pipeline over in India. And we had a team in Mumbai who a lot of people used to say to us, is it just an outsourcing procedure? But it was required because the planning conditions and everything is so different out there that the team were the experts in that field, and we were the ones that were coordinating designs to work there. And India and Mumbai had a tricky COVID, and it was almost the right time for us as well to think about, if we are doing international, where do we want to work in the world? And London is such an incredible place for us where we are, and there's a reason why we're here. So we're predominantly working in London, but we have got opportunities in the UAE that have been coming up. We've had a project in Finland and also in Spain. So it is a case where we're applying our principles and values to architecture. We feel really fortunate that it's a language that's translatable across the world. We've recently got asked to be in a competition for Osaka in Japan, and we were bringing principles of British technology in construction to an amazing opportunity over in Japan, Osaka, and we had to work within the context of it had to be well understood for people in Osaka. So we had to work with people over there. But it's something that we do want as part of our DNA. It's not wedded to any particular one place, but we do want to continue that journey of
did you find that, say, working in India, for example, because I remember seeing some of the images that came out, and it was like, I was just talking to those guys a few weeks ago. They're doing like massive towers now. It's extraordinary. Yeah. Was that quite, as well, like the opportunities that present themselves and sometimes
they're often they can be bigger. And I think that's interesting, tying back to London. It's like the London brand, what London stands for, and the British design process and what the British have done in the past. And there's huge value in that. And we're in a really interesting point on the map where we are connecting point for so many different countries. So you do that's quite powerful externally. But also I think we've talked about this quite a bit, but post-globalism, we're in a far more connected world, and we've got big problems ahead of us. We kind of feel we've got a bit of an obligation to share as much as possible, to collaborate as widely as possible, because that's where those adjacencies actually change innovation, actually make a difference. So Dicky mentioned Osaka, that actually has brought us into contact with, and it was British technology. So we were working with a really amazing engineer called Andy Coward. We had this amazing design for a 3D printed beam that uses 80% less concrete. Then he brought us into contact with Ceratec, which is a company that does carbon negative cement. You've got this amazing structural solution. And we designed that to look a bit like Shakespeare's Globe, which has got this really nice story about demountability, because it was originally just over here in Shoreditch. Yeah. It was taken down, taken across the river and rebuilt. So there's a really nice story about circularity, British design, British ideas exported. But that could be done with consultants and contacts in the Middle East, with other people we might be working with in Japan. Singapore, an opportunity has come up recently. And these are really interesting places where you've got different climates, different regulations, different issues, and different approaches that we can add huge value to when we come together.
So this is very interesting, like just kind of to speculate a little bit here with you guys about, for you, what is the future of architectural practice? And we are, I mean, my perspective or kind of opinions, if you like, that there's going to be quite big macroeconomic shifts and changes. There's people in the US, big investors who are speculating about changing world orders and want to get really kind of, global about it. But we're also on this precipice of intense interconnectedness, which is quite fantastic. And opportunities, and the kind of old guard of architectural practice has traditionally been quite static and immobile. For you, what is the kind of future of white red, and how you think is going to be a powerful way to... It's
quite exciting, really. I mean, it's almost an honour to be within an industry that has such a big impact. And that, back to the international point, that allowed us to have a different perception of some of the macro problems that affect the whole world, which a lot of people discuss, but a lot of the time people discuss it within the context of quite a small locale. And particularly in London, I think we're quite to blame of that. Typically the debate is at the moment a lot about retrofit and retro first and all those things, which are really important for London and a really big step for London. But that doesn't apply to the emerging markets and the changing global order. And it isn't about one or the other. It's about not arguing whether it's one or the other. It's about how do we solve those larger problems as well as retrofit. So it's our opinion is that the international projects allow us the opportunity to expand our horizons and also apply some of our values to some of these larger issues. And that's, we feel it's a really exciting thing to be. And that's where we're more optimistic about architecture as a fact of maybe it's diminished in our role and it's being diversified too much and the old architect, the era of it is gone. It's actually, no, this is really great. This is a great opportunity for us to have a massive contribution to some of these issues.
And I think also technology massively changing the landscape and obviously AI. But we're looking ahead at what that really means for many industries, but particularly in architecture. It's focusing on why architecture even existed. It didn't exist so that we could do drawings. It created because we want to create spaces for people. So it's focusing on people. And that's why marketing is quite interesting, again, focusing on voices and people and their stories and the way they see the world and the way groups see things. That's far more interesting. This technology is allowing us to shift focus onto that, which is far more fulfilling and hopefully leads to far better outcomes.
Well, I think that's very interesting. The kind of the globalized outlook combined with a technological outlook as well. That's a very kind of positive, future. And it's very interesting to kind of speculate on, perhaps here there's a lot of concern. There's always these concerns about new technologies of like, it's going to replace architects and it's going to replace probably not. It's going to add more tools to the belt and become, more power in your curatorial and editorial abilities. Yeah. But also the approach of how these technologies get adapted in other countries. So we look at somewhere like India and China and the African continent, and we see how fast and readily they adopted something like mobile technology. And now how fast they're adopting AI technology, whereas here we're still like...
They want to shortcut the process, which we should all be wanting to do, actually, because the point wasn't just to create work for ourselves. The point was to improve. And you can end up very protectionist when you're quite established. And so you think that the point is progress. We need to work with this and we need to have a very open and collaborative mindset.
Amazing. What's the rest of 2023 got in store for you?
We've got some really exciting projects just come through very recently, and it's taking us to a larger scale of projects within the UK and London. So the rest of the year will be keeping to what Simon Orford recommended to make sure we deliver well and keep building a reputation. And we keep mentioning marketing. It really is about trying to communicate what our values are and doing it really, really in a great way and as much as we can.
We're making videos, which we're going to start releasing.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah. We're following your lead.
Exactly.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. That's a perfect place to conclude the conversation. It's been an absolute joy to speak with you again.
It's
and
great
so nice to be able to, to visit a practice, having had the privilege of seeing you guys in as a sort of three-man operation and now being like a sophisticated 20-person strong team who's like still just at the beginning of what you're about to accomplish. So thank you very much.
We'll see you in 5 years.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys.
Back to 3. Thanks, Ryan.
And that's a wrap. And don't forget, if you want to access your free training to learn how to structure your firm or practice for freedom, fulfillment and profit, please visit smartpracticemethod.com. Or if you'd like to speak to one of our advisors directly, follow the link in the information. The views expressed on this show by my guests do not represent those of the host, and I make no representation, promise, guarantee, pledge, warranty, contract bond, or commitment, except to help you be unstoppable.